Well, hello people, and welcome to a little City Skylines 2 video. I hope you're having a wonderful day. It is the last patch of the year for City Skylines 2, and this one is an absolute chungus. It apparently includes some serious performance improvements and gameplay fixes, alongside two brand new free maps, so we'll be checking those out as well. So let's get started with these new maps, shall we? And we'll see what they're like. The Coral Riches is a North American themed map with a climate range between 3 and 34 degrees centigrade. Lies within the Northern Hemisphere, has a 76% buildable area. All of its outside connections and all resources are available. Now the big selling point with this map is that it is flat as a pancake. We've gone from having all the contour lines across all the other maps to having 0 on this one. If you're looking for a flat coastal map that is extremely buildable, this is probably the one for you. If you're interested within its natural resources, there are pretty significant chunks of fertile land. Massive oil and ore reserves also present on this map as well. And if you're looking to build industry, then all of that air pollution is blowing out toward the ocean. So imagine a lot of your industry eventually in this map will be along those coastlines. Your opening tile does present you with some nice opportunities with a little coastline to make use out of before it enters the actual ocean. And the international rail connection isn't too far away and will be relatively easy to integrate into your city that you build here. But the only selling point here really for the map is the fact that it is super flat. Just taking a look around the landscape with our gradient lines on, you can see compared to a lot of the others in City Skylines, it is just very, very, very flat. And whatever contour lines there are actually outside of the buildable space itself. Wouldn't be a bad idea this to kind of maybe come in with something of a Chicago-inspired build for Coral Riches. I'm not a fan of these flat maps. I like mountain ranges and I like hills. It's why I'm not a massive lover of Tampere. That's a super flat map as well. Although I'd argue that Tampere definitely is more interesting than this one. But it's a free map. It definitely has been put in here to pacify the people that aren't happy with the insane gradients that are available within the launch maps. It definitely isn't the most interesting. And looks like it didn't take that long to make either. But it's a free map. You can't really whinge. If you wanted a super flat one, then you have one now. The second of our free maps is Sunshine Peninsula, which is in the European theme, has a climate range of 11 to 27 degrees centigrade, lies in the Northern Hemisphere, has a 60% buildable area, all of its outside connections and all available natural resources. However, the selling point here that it will never rain and it will never snow. So if those weather effects were giving you a bit of a nauseating effect, you might find some enjoyment with Sunshine Peninsula. Those interested in the natural resources, pretty significant deposits of fertile land, allowing for some actually believable sort of farming space to be built because there's just such huge pockets of it. And then the mountain with the little peninsula, or the plateau on top, is covered in ore and a bit of fertile land. And then there tends to be some oil knocking around in pockets as well. For those looking to build the more pollutive of the industries, then all your air pollution is blowing north, sort of out in the direction of the shipping lanes themselves. So this one isn't nearly as flat as Coral Riches. You've actually got quite a nice little sort of stepped mountain range up here actually as you arrive on top of a plateau that has a lake in it. So a lot more of an interesting landscape to work with if you're interested in playing with this sort of stuff. The rest of the map is admittedly quite flat. We will wang on our topography layers here. You can see it's pretty just flat plains before it slopes down toward that coastline. And then you've got all the hills to play with over here within your playable space. The islands just off the coast aren't actually reachable if you're planning on kind of having a bit of an archipelago haven combined with the mainland here. You can't actually reach those. So again, it's not the most mind-blowing map ever. I'd probably put this into a middle-of-the-road B tier, if not C tier map if we were doing these in a tier list. But its USP is basically no weather. There's no snow and there's no rain on this map. So if you weren't a fan of the weather effects from the game, then this map gives you an alternative until something else better comes along. Not the best map ever, but again, it's free, so we can't complain. So a significant performance patch has dropped with this one, including adding LODs, or level of detail, for characters and certain selected assets. So for those that aren't familiar with an LOD, it's basically how detailed and how fleshed out a rendered model is, and how horrible and pixelated that becomes the further you move away from it. They're basically there to stop the city from rendering everything at once in full detail, and they've finally been added for characters. So Colossal Order and Paradox have spent a good amount of time since the launch actually denying the fact that these strangely detailed sim and character models around the city were the cause and the source of the lag that many of us have been experiencing. You can see them denying it online in many different articles. However, a couple of weeks prior to this, in the Word of the Week, currently written by the CEO of Colossal Order, they kind of joked that they were consulting a dentist about these performance issues, meaning that these highly detailed sims were the cause of the issue, which I found pretty hilarious, to be honest. But with all this less rendering going on now when you're around your sims, and indeed they do still look a little bit weird and some of their fashion choices are quite questionable, you should now notice some significant frame gains from having these level of details on the characters and certain assets. So if you played on launch week and were suffering significant performance issues, this might now be the patch to jump back in and test just how your machine can handle the game. They've also decreased virtual texturing pressure with assets that don't use emissive maps. I don't know what that means. They have disabled VSync for default settings, however when I load in on a default setting, VSync is still enabled, so if that's something you want to play without, just double check that it is actually disabled. And they've also disabled volumetric lighting calculations where it was almost invisible. Volumetric lighting is very graphically intensive, so if it's basically not noticeable, then there's no point in it being there. So you're really likely to notice an increase in performance from that note as well. Coming into the gameplay side of things, so there's been a few tweaks made here. Improved lane changing behavior for vehicles is up there at the top of the list. This is something that we've all suffered with way back from Cities 1 and something that Traffic Manager was particularly effective in helping with. In my particular experience with Cities Skylines 2, I've never really had any horrendous lane changing behaviour. I imagine this becomes a significant problem the busier and larger your city becomes, but it's nice to see that this has been improved and hopefully will continue to improve from this point too. They've also removed the traffic accidents that last forever, which is nice. You no longer have that annoying flashing symbol for cars that cannot be rescued from these accidents. If you've been using cargo air transport in your city, there has now been increases to the capacities of this particular type of transport. And there's also been a whole bunch of fixes to the import, export and storage systems within the game, which have been quite obviously bugged since the game had launched. So hopefully now those import and export functions are going to be a little bit more accurate and actually make sense. For example, they will no longer be exporting when the output resource amount is below 0. The economy has also had more fixes as well. Now, my economy's been up and down and all over the place with these patches. It has gone from insanely profitable back to just slightly profitable, but for right now it seems to be a little more stabilised, including the fact that income being awarded twice has now been fixed as well. If you weren't also aware, saving and rebooting the game would give extra XP based on the number of residential buildings in the city. This has now been fixed, which makes it dramatically less cheesable, although the XP system is still quite exploitable should you wish to play with it in that way. Otherwise, you're not going to be getting just spammed with XP every time you load in now, especially for those cities that have significantly larger residential areas. There's also some achievements now available that would not be able to be earned previously, and you can also press M while you're in photo mode, which will remove your UI for the duration of that session. Nothing massively groundbreaking in there, but it's definitely exciting to see the import, export and general storage part of the simulation start to find its feet a little more now, and some extra gameplay tweaks to help make the game not feel as cheesy are always welcome. There's also been some changes to the graphics side of the game, including adding the line colour to passenger ships, cargo ships and cargo train engines. It's also improved the quality of character model variation, although in my experience having played on this patch, this is up for debate. I think the character models, you could argue in some cases, are almost too varied, although hopefully there's now significantly less camel toe knocking around the city after this patch. They've also improved the lights on forestry machinery and the props for several buildings. The spawn point for cargo trucks not being inside the warehouse as expected. the international airport roads are not inverted with left-hand traffic, and a whole bunch of other graphical little tweaks. So where does that leave Cities Skylines 2 currently? This patch has definitely improved the game significantly. I would say if you were one of those people that picked up the game at launch and just had horrendous performance issues, especially with the frame rate, it's markedly better now, so consider giving it another boot. You might find you get much better performance these days than you did, say, 2 months ago. There's one thing I'm noticing, and for those that are following our Egginburgh series, which is linked down below by the way, is that we had this awful kind of potato tree mode that would just destroy textures at a distance. It would just look awful. It made recording the game a ball ache. It made playing it even worse. That thankfully has at least calmed down. There's perhaps slight instances of it still, but it's at least a 95% improvement compared to some of the texture popping that I was getting previously. So that's one of my biggest bugbears gone. Otherwise, let me know how you guys have experienced this patch. Have you noticed a markable improvement in your performance, in the way the game looks and plays? Or are you still plagued with issues? I'd be interested to know exactly how you guys, the rest of the community, are experiencing CS2 as it continues to find its feet within the city building genre. Otherwise, massive shout out to all the patrons with a special roll call to Felix Wilkinson. Thank you for continuing to support the channel, guys. Indeed, we have CS1 and CS2 content on the channel, so something for everyone. Also, let me know as well if you want to continue to see these patch update videos as the major ones drop. I'm always happy to cover them and give an honest, unfiltered opinion on exactly what's been added. Otherwise, let's thank you all so much for watching, and as always, enjoy the rest of your day.